2018. Could Diane call the roll, please?
Mayor Donches.
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman is absent. Commissioner Pappas.
Here.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Here.
Commissioner Tease.
Present.
Is there a motion regarding the agenda?
I'll move to,
Oh, Alderman Jettie is here, sorry, and Alderwoman Malitzi Golia is also here in the audience. What did we decide on seconds? Did we discuss that? Did we decide we needed them or not?
I have the item
For what?
here.
We decided that Commissioner Moriarty was not here, so
Oh, he was not.
we decided that the discussion would take place when Commissioner Moriarty was here.
Okay.
Well,
Well, let's continue with seconds for at least for the time
Well,
being.
can we, I was going to say before, because I do have it, because the rules are the rules.
All right, and this is Roberts you're looking at?
Yes. Oh, yeah, I would never look at Masons. I don't, that's so complicated. So, of course, I forgot my reading glasses. Procedure in small boards. Can I speak? I'm sorry.
Yes, please. You're sort of interrupting things, but that's all right. I brought it up. I brought it up,
You know what? I was
so-
going to ask after, how about if I move to approve the agenda as amended under number 2, and then introduce the second item after we approve that?
The second item being,
The motion to approve the agenda as presented. I'm going to say the amended agenda, because it's.
okay,
it's
so
going
the motion is to approve the amended agenda. Is there a
Correct.
second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
How's it amended?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. The
it's
only two,
golden.
there are two aldermanic referrals that were added,
Got it.
C and D. Those are the only two amendments.
Yeah, when you say golden one, yeah. So we have to.
Oh, I see it. Okay, thank you.
That's it.
All right, is there a motion on the minutes?
I'll move to approve the Public Works meeting minutes of March 22nd, 2018.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes.
Move to unseal the non-public minutes from the Board of Public Works meeting of March 22, 2018.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes.
Can I was going to ask that in between 2 and 3 that we can discuss this second issue.
The
If you
meeting,
pref-
this is the issue of having seconds, yes.
Yeah.
Why don't we, what if we take public comment just in case, and
Okay.
then we'll go to that, how about that? Is there anyone from the public who wants to speak? Apparently not. So, Commissioner Pappas.
So I'll preface this statement with saying that the last 2 chairs that I've served under have been very good about allowing discussion, that sort of thing. But just since we're looking, at the rules, I just think it's interesting that we do go by the rules of the small boards with one exception, that's the second. So if people will indulge me, I will read it. If people object, I won't. I'll wait till Commissioner comments if anyone objects.
All right, does anyone object? No, no one objects.
Mayor,
Yes. Commissioner
just for the
Moore.
record, according to Robert's rules, we shouldn't be discussing anything that's not on the agenda. So it's not on the agenda, we really shouldn't be discussing it, but, I'll weigh that since you brought it up.
Yeah, it was sort of spontaneous with me, because I remembered, oh my God, we did discuss this second thing. How did it come out? All right, so why don't we go ahead?
Okay, so I'll just say with these rules, the rules are the rules. Procedures in small boards. In a small board meeting where there is not more than about a dozen members present, some formality that is necessary in large boards would hinder business. The rules in governing such meetings differ from the rules that hold in other assemblies but in some respects. Members may, well, obviously, members may use a hand instead of standing for a motion. And the other item, the other items I will read, motions need not be seconded. There is no limit to the number of times to speak to a debatable question. Obviously, I recognize that some items are not debatable. And then this other important item, which I think that you've been very good about, informal discussion of subject is permitted on, while a motion is pending. So I did find that in Robert's rules, and I just thought it might expedite and then also allow for discussion if there's not a second on a motion.
So just to set the context, the last time, I forget how this came up, but somehow this came up, this issue.
Yeah, I had looked at the rules, yeah.
And the issue arose, is a second required? And I happen to have gotten into this a little bit because the school board also uses Roberts. And there's even though Roberts is a very long book, there's a 2-page section covering small boards, which has a simplified set of rules, which would seem to apply both here and to the Board of Ed. They define small board under some number, I forget, but it's much less, many more than 5. And in there, it suggests you don't need a second. And at least according to the city attorney in talking about the Board of Ed, really the only 2 pages you need to look at in the context of small boards are really, because he appeared at the Board of Ed to talk about the rules, are those 2 pages that you, Commissioner Pappas, were just referring to. So it seems like, unless the board votes otherwise, I will apply the rules of the 2 pages that seem to apply to small boards.
Is that a motion? Because if so, I want to second it to be the last second.
Well, I don't know if the chair can make a motion, but I will. in
Will
this
you move it? And I want to second it.
All right, so there's a motion to use the small boards section of the rules,
And it is page 35 and 36.
35 and 36. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Moriarty.
My interpretation of Robert's rules is that any motion does need a second, so I would prefer a legal opinion on that, if that's okay with you, Mayor. The reason for a second is to do away with frivolous, time-wasting conversation, and that's why it's in Robert's rules that an action needs to have a backup, and if there's only one person, that's not enough, according to Robert's rules, so that's.
All right, well, that seems like a fair request, especially since this is not on the agenda and came up as a surprise. So why don't we continue as we've done for the remainder of this meeting. In the interim, before the next meeting, I will get the city attorney to address us on this question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pappas.
I would just say that in the context of Robert's rules, it's done to protect a minority, and it's easy to be a minority on a 5-member board.
Yes.
And I think that there have been times, I think, that in the past, that if you don't second a motion, you don't have to show your record as to what you think to the people. And that's why, it sounds like there's already been a legal opinion on this.
Well, but I mean, we're just bringing this up now.
But Commissioner, in all due respect, we brought it up at the last meeting, and someone was absent that felt strongly about it, and.
All right, well, let's continue as we have, and we'll straighten it out. We'll get Attorney Bolton's view before the next meeting. How's that? In a written form, rather than him just saying something to me about some other board. All right, aldermanic referrals. There is R18-022. Is there a motion on this in order to at least put it on the table?
I'll move to a positive recommendation for R-18-022, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $2,500,000 for the fiscal year 2018 sewer infrastructure program.
So the motion is to recommend final passage of the resolution. Now, I know Alderwoman Malizzi Golia is here to talk about some of the aldermanic referrals, but not this one, right? Okay.
Which is D.
Okay. Does anyone have any discussion on the motion that's before us? Which is to recommend final passage.
I get, it's one of those things, I know that when people watch, sometimes there's not a whole lot of discussion, but no one wants to spend that kind of money, but it's necessary. I guess that would be.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. We now have R-18-023.
I'll move for positive recommendation of R-18-023, changing the purpose up to $514,000 of unextended bond proceeds from various wastewater projects to the fiscal year 2018 sewer infrastructure program.
Second.
Discussion?
I have a question.
Alderman Jettie.
So I probably should have asked this regarding the first one, but it's similar. I noticed that we're replacing the sewer pipes with PVC with an expected life of 50 years. But the stuff we're replacing has been in the ground since before 1900. Is the stuff that we're replacing have a...
Engineer speak to that.
Does the PVC have a better life expectancy than the 50 years? Sounds shorter than 100, so.
Steve was coming up, but you can speak to it too, I guess.
You have better information, go ahead.
Ooh.
Steve Gibbons, city engineer. First part is, these pipes should have been replaced years ago, at least 40 years ago. We have pushed the life on some of these old pipes. But secondly is, the PVC actually has a life that's much longer than 50 years. People have been doing analysis on PVC. Although we don't have 100 years of experience with PVC, we probably have like 40 or 50 years. The projected life is actually beyond 100 years, according to the studies.
So why does it say?
Go ahead.
Why does it say 50 years
Well,
on the resolution?
just so that it exceeds the bond life by so many years. But yeah, we expect a lot longer than 50 years on these pipes.
So what he's saying in terms of referring to the bond life is that in order to bond a project, you have to demonstrate or you have to find that the life of the project is longer than the payout period of the bonds. So on a 20-year bond, it should say it has a life of X. Now maybe you're pointing out maybe it would be better if it was more longer, but it's really just to establish for bond counsel that the project is going to last more than 20 years.
Okay. And I have another question about the second resolution. This is evidently money left over from a bond for wastewater. And I notice we've been, if my memory is correct, we've been spending extra money on the wastewater treatment plant, valves and different things. Why aren't we using this money for that as opposed to this?
So the leftover money is from 3 different projects: the storage facility, the aeration upgrade, and the water equipment replacement. So 2 of the projects were actually planned projects. The tank was a CSO project, a combined sewer separation project. The need for sewer infrastructure rehabilitation in the street is, at this point in time, is a lot higher than the need for further plant upgrades. We have fallen so far behind in repairing our failing sewers. As you pointed out, you know, a lot of them are over 100 years old, and we're still trying to get a handle as to really what that quantity is and what the program we should be going forward with. We're working on that right now. So the more money we can funnel into this area, the better off we are. For example, we had a bid out for our sewer rehabilitation project for this year, and prices have gone up so much that the bid came in at least 40% higher than we expected. So we have to kind of reconfigure what this year's program is going to be in order to be able to afford to do any kind of work this year.
So I understand the need for this project, but, you know, it's a the total of about $3 million. Why aren't we just requesting a bond for $3 million for the sewers and leaving the wastewater money for wastewater projects or wastewater needs?
Yes.
Or is it just an accounting thing that doesn't really matter?
I think it comes down to that, actually. I'm not sure about the answer, but I believe it has to do with the rate analysis that was performed, the analysis of the rate, setting the rate structure, and how much money can go towards any particular area. And there's only so much of bonding that can be done within a particular year. I believe that is the basic premise behind this.
And we also consider this all of the sewer system. So all of the pipes is considered part of the sewer system too. We don't differentiate necessarily between the plant and the pipes and the pump stations that are bringing all the material to the plant. That's another reason.
Okay.
It's all part of the sewer system. And we are, as the city engineer said, way behind on upgrading our sewer system. We probably have 30% of our sewers in the inner city that are failing. So we're doing an analysis of that now, and we'll have a better sense of what we need to do going forward. But we expect we're going to need far more than what we currently have been spending to bring our sewer system back into compliance. So
Okay, thank you.
that's to come.
Excuse me, any other discussion? Commissioner Pappas.
I'll be brief, but just as a background, my first year on the board, I think it was Mayor Lozo's first year also. The bond rates had been cut a few years prior to that. I don't recall how many. And there wasn't a whole, I think that there was an issue with not paying attention to how much the whole wastewater system had. And we were in a position where we didn't have what should be in certain accounts. And that's when the sewer rates started increasing, because we actually weren't charging enough and we weren't really paying attention to how much was in each account. It was a real nightmare, a logistical nightmare, and I do think it got straightened out pretty well, but I think that's why you're seeing, that's why you're gonna see so much. Obviously, wastewater sewer, it's a very corrosive process. And when something has been, I don't wanna say ignored, but neglected, I guess, because I don't think that anything was done purposely. There was nothing, there were no shenanigans, no one, it was not done purposefully. It was just a lack of paying attention to the issue. So I think that in the years since then, we've done a really good job at trying to get caught up, but the stuff is not cheap. And yeah, so I just thought that background might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the motion before us is to recommend final passage of R 18-023. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes. We next have ordinance 018-014, which setting parks and rec fees.
Move to positively recommend 18-014, setting parks and recreation fees.
Second.
Now, would you, we do have Mr. Caggiano here, who's had input into this. Maybe he should come up and give us some insight.
Nick Caggiano, Park and Rec Department, Superintendent. The fee structure is something some members of the boards and the director asked me to start investigating last year, where we did an analysis of all the different towns, and we determined that the fields were getting overused quite heavily, and we decided to come up with a fee structure, which you all approved back in, I want to say, October or November of last year. And the process to get those fees on the books has just gotten us to the point where the Board of Aldermen are going to approve it, and then the accounts will be set up so that those fees could go into accounts so that the funding can be used to maintain the facilities.
Any questions, comments? All right, the motion is to recommend approval of the ordinance, the proposed ordinance. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes. We next have ordinance O-18-007.
I'll move for positive approval of O-18-007, prohibiting and placing or blowing yard debris in the street.
Is there a second? Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it for discussion.
All right, the motion is to recommend final passage of O-18-007. And Alderwoman Malitzi Golia, who I believe is the sponsor
Yes.
at the Board of
Yes.
Aldermen, is here to speak to this, so
Yes.
please go forward.
Thank you. And first of all,
Just
thank you
for-
to Alderman Jettie.
Just for a matter of clarification, you're moving to adopt the amended,
Yes, I probably should have put it in, yes.
I understand that the language from the original ordinance has gone to legal, and there has been some change in that wording. None of this has gone to infrastructure, so when it goes to infrastructure, it will be going as the original ordinance, and at that point, a motion will be made to adopt the language recommended here as amended. Okay. But just, first of all, I apologize for not being here for the first reading. I wasn't feeling well and went home to take a nap and woke up and it was 7 o'clock. So you were all long home, I hope. But I read through the minutes, and just to give you some history on this, I will say that there are some chronic offenders in my ward who I have been hearing about for a couple of years. And within a 24-hour period, I received several calls from people one rainy autumn afternoon because someone was blowing their leaves into an intersection that happened to be on a downhill slope, and it was raining. And 2 people called me because as they came down the hill and attempted to slide, their car fishtailed. So I decided, okay, let's do something about it. Dory, Attorney Clark, contacted Director Photo, who said, if it's passed, then we'll do something with it. The police chief weighed in and said, if it's passed, we'll enforce it. After it had its first reading at the Board of Aldermen, I was contacted by several people in other wards in the city who said, oh my gosh, thank you, because we have people who do this all the time in my ward. One woman told me, he blows his stuff out into the street. I hate to say it, it's usually a he. And then cars come by and all the dust comes blowing in my windows, so I can't leave my windows open. And other people have complained about just leaves piling up on streets, and then it rains and they're slick and people are skidding. So that's a bit of the history for this piece of legislation. And in reading your minutes and looking at your questions and following the conversation between Alderman Jettie and the city attorney, I totally understand your concerns, and I don't think there was anything that was meant to keep people from putting things out a day or two in advance, or people cleaning lawns from putting everything out, and then their big truck would come through and suck them up. It's more a situation of people just putting things there because they don't want to put them in bags and leaving them in the street, causing potential situations. And most recently, there was another situation in my neighborhood I'm familiar with where someone took some very large branches, like maybe 6 or 7 feet, piled them up along the side of the road, and it was on a curve on the downhill side, and 3 people told me I almost hit those at night because they were piled in the road. And I was like, well, hopefully we'll be addressing all of that, and they were piled there for probably a week before they were picked up. So it's those sorts of things that I've heard comments about, but also led to looking at this. But just to be clear, after you met, Alderman Jettie and I talked, and he had indicated he had then contacted Attorney Clark for changing in the language. So I talked with Alderman O'Brien, who is Chair of Infrastructure, and this has not hit infrastructure yet. It was tabled because the other part of the process would have been, it would have gone to infrastructure, to legal, back to you. So Alderman O'Brien and I talked and thought, well, we would just continue with the process as it was moving forward. But that's kind of the history of why this came about. And it's been, as I said, a chronic problem, and after it got its first reading at the Board of Aldermen, I was contacted by other people in other wards who said, oh yeah, we have the same problem. So I know that it's happening other places in the city. So I don't know if there are questions.
Any questions for Alderwoman Malitzi Golia? Commissioner Pappas.
More comment. In my 10 years, I've had a lot of people complain about that. I mean, it's incredibly inconsiderate, and I was surprised that it wasn't already covered. And there were very few houses I've seen, but there are a couple of people that do blow them at the edge of the street, and people who are going to take the time to do that, to do all of theirs. It's usually, you wouldn't be able to enforce it within the time that the truck
Right.
usually comes.
Right.
In addition to it being a danger where it gets slippery and then it gets ice over it, you're going to be looking at that all winter long. But it's also practically, if someone has, or it's at the end of the season and someone's already done their cleanup, they're not picking up leaves anymore, or someone paid someone to do a cleanup, and then you're getting more leaves because an inconsiderate person blew that in the street. I think that helps. I also think that it's not good for our, maybe, depending on where the offenders are, they eventually, can blow into storm drains and culverts, and I strongly support that. I will tell you, though, I think it might be difficult to enforce, but that being said, at least it's there for the chronic offenders.
Right. And I would agree with you. And as someone called me, again, not one of my constituents, from another ward, and said, oh, I'm really glad, you introduced this. And I said, well, it's going to be there on the books, but it's going to be up to neighbors to call.
Right.
So you've got the tool. Now you need to call, because I don't think all of you are going to be driving around the city. I don't think all the Board of Aldermen are going to be driving around the city monitoring this. It's one of those things where if you really think it's an unsafe situation, then it's up to you as a resident to make the call. And certainly the calls are anonymous. So we're just giving people the tool, and if it's unsafe enough or they're annoyed by it enough, I guess they have the tool to call, just like they do when snows just put out in the middle of the street and left there to freeze overnight after the trucks have gone by.
Commissioner Tease.
Thank you, Alderwoman, for your passion and concern and safety of the citizens. I think that's everyone's concern for sure. I had a question with respect to, and I'm not expecting you to know the answer to this, so I'm
That's
focusing this way. In terms of the punishment and the implementation, and how many other laws are on the books, ordinances on the books like this, and will this potentially open the floodgates to, you know, something like this each meeting? Not that it isn't important, but is it enforceable? Are they patrolled, and does it take away from other resources within the city?
I think what you're talking about is like something that a resident reports and then the police comes out.
Yeah, well, so I wouldn't have known if this was an ordinance or a law or not, but I'm wondering, are there other things like for dog fouling, for instance? I live on Concord Street, and I can't tell you how many times I'm picking up other people's dog stuff.
There is a dog
Yeah, there
ordinance.
is.
There's also,
Give me that info.
I can tell you, I was recently educated because of a long-term conversation about this. If people, we used to have a law in the books, an ordinance that said you couldn't park in the front setback from the street to the front of your house. There was no parking on the lawn. That was challenged about 4 or 5 years ago, and so now you can park in your front lawn. But what I found out was that you can't drive over a city curb to park in your front lawn. So, again, I get a call, I contact code enforcement and find out that it is kind of hard to enforce, but in the spring and in the winter when it's muddy, if someone's driving over that Cape Cod berm and they're doing it on a regular basis, or they've basically worn ruts into the lawn and you can see it's being used, you call the police and they will come out and enforce that. So that's another example of something similar to that. It's on the books, and again, it's up to the neighbors. The police don't go around.
And what is the punishment for such a violation? Is it a 3-strike process? You get a warning? Like, I suppose when you learned of the branches being piled up, someone went and knocked on the door and shared with these folks that it posed a danger to the neighbors?
I know people have talked to them.
Yeah.
I know neighbors have said, you know, this is really annoying, and you really shouldn't be doing it.
And is it a nominal fine?
I don't know what the fine is. The fine, I think, for parking in the front setback was $100 or something like that. I mean, it wasn't like $1,000 or something.
I think it's discretionary with the court, but there's an upper limit which I'm not sure. It might be higher than 100. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I think it's 1,000 too. Also, the city does have an ordinance now that allows departments to issue tickets, in effect, for violations. Now, whether the dog ordinance is covered by that, I'm not positive. We could check that out. But with respect to housing code, things like that, the city can issue a ticket, which can be appealed, but it's still a ticket that stands unless there's an appeal. Maybe that process is available for the dog ordinance as well.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
You're welcome.
Maybe for this,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so those are the things, Commissioner Tease, I think as an alderman you learn about through experience. You know, you pick up the phone and say, how do you handle this? And so there are probably other ones that luckily I haven't had the experience of experiencing.
Understood. Thank you.
You're
There's
welcome.
no question that the police can enforce this and the dog ordinance. The only issue I'm
Right.
raising is, can other departments issue a ticket? And we can check that out, but
I guess kind of the point I'm sorry, may I speak?
yes.
Kind of the point I was getting to is enforcement, right? I don't think, because the law exists, I don't know as if I'd call the police on a neighbor for dog fouling. And I'm just wondering, you know, how it gets policed was more my question. And is it something that will be top of mind for this season, and then will it be part of a collection of 100 other ordinances that were very important for safety and concern of the citizens that just don't get paid attention to any longer? Or is this something that is going to remain top of mind for everyone?
And again, I can only speak to my experience as an alderwoman. All these little ordinances, I never know about until someone calls me and says, what can we do about it?
Right.
And the first thing I usually do is call Director Marchant and say, Director Marchant, do we have something that addresses this? And where do we go? And she usually says, oh, yes, here it is.
Okay.
So I don't think it's something that people just walk around saying, okay, this is there, let me enforce it.
Right.
But it's, the situation's gotten to the point
You'll have
where
a tool now to
it's
use.
chronic, and even after maybe saying something, it continues. So now there's a tool to kind of up the ante. I know in one instance of front yard parking, our code enforcement, I have to say, is wonderful. They go out and talk with people and work with people, and then we'll finally say, look, if you're not going to work with us, we're going to have to enforce this. And I know from several situations in my ward involving code work not only with the offender, but with the rest of the neighbors to help the offender right what they were doing that was in violation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pappas.
And just a comment and a clarification. In my tenure on the board, my 10 years, I have had people express concerns about that. And if I understand it correctly, it's an ordinance that already exists, and I think it's just almost an amendment to the ordinance. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
I think, yeah. So it's already something on the books. It's just adding to something on the books.
Thank you.
There was snow. It was related to snow, and then they added the yard debris to the ordinance.
Right, so,
Commissioner
Just a couple
Moriarty.
questions. I am also concerned about the last sentence in this ordinance about the violator is subject to punishment, and the punishment is not listed as to what this punishment is. So I'm concerned about enforcement of this and the punishment. I think it's quite odd that we can't require residents to shovel their sidewalks so people can walk on their sidewalks. They're forced to walk on the street, but now we're going to punish them for leaves in the street. I think it's quite odd to me. Third, this will also affect all the lawn care companies that are taking care of a lot of lawns in the city, so that's something that will raise a flag to the small companies. And lastly, this is my first reading of this ordinance. This was not in our packet. I've never seen it before. This is the first time I've seen it, and quite frankly, I'm not comfortable voting in favor of this today, since I have not seen this before. That's just my opinion.
okay, and Commissioner Moriarty, and Alderman Jettie worked on this. It had its first presentation at your March meeting. So what you're seeing today is, has been worked on with legal, but I will tell you, above where you were reading, item 2 says that this will not apply to cleanup or collection of material when collection and cleanup is occurring at the same time. So if my lawn cleanup company's doing 3 yards in the neighborhood and they're piling stuff along the side of the street, this isn't going to impact them. And again, this is something where I think residents are reporting, and the situations that I've been made aware of aren't people even blowing their leaves along the side of the street. They're blowing them clear across the street or into the middle of the pathway where traffic is moving. So, but I know that Alderman Jettie worked with the city attorney to address that concern, and so that's been added here. And in terms of punishment, it is indicated here where you would find that at the end of that sentence as provided in 1-12. So I guess you would have to go there to reference it. But again, my experience, although it's only 8 years, it's not like some of the experience around this table. My experience has been that the police and code enforcement are not quick to go out and find people, and there's usually a warning first. But again, this isn't about cleanup that's occurring where I may be putting my leaves along the side of the road and then I'm coming down with my barrel and I'm scooping them up and putting them in my barrel or my bag. This is about people who are actually putting their lawn debris in the roadway, in the center of the roadway where traffic's moving and basically causing obstruction.
This would be enforced by the PD.
PD.
Any other discussion? All right, the motion before us is to recommend final passage of the ordinance. All those in favor of the ordinance, or of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion passes, and the ordinance is recommended for final passage.
Okay, thank you. And once again, this wording will go to infrastructure, and we will let them know that this is what you've approved and that it's already gone through legal. So it will show up on their agenda with this as the amendment to it. And I just have to say, listening to your meeting, thank you for all you do, because it's certainly not the most glamorous things in the city that you deal with, but they're certainly very important. So thank you for your time.
We're on to Parks and Recreation. First, we have an informational item, Broad Street Parkway Rotary Landscape Design. We're from Mr. Caggiano and I think Mr. Parker.
Good afternoon. Nick Caggiano, Park and Rec Superintendent. I wanted to introduce Mr. William Parker from Parker Garden Designs. The director tasked me last summer, said, Nick, you got to do something with the Rotary at Broad Street. It really is in pretty poor shape. There was an agreement at the time with some people from Sullivan Farm, but that's kind of fell by the wayside. So we took some permaculture courses, and we learned about sustainability, and I met Bill at one of our Twilight landscape meetings, and he sounded like the perfect guy for the job. We hired him to do a landscape design, which he's very excited about. It's not going to take a long time. It won't take a lot of your time. We'll explain it. He also is very willing and excited about helping with the install and doing it as a partnership with the division. And you're going to love this thing because it's sustainable, requires very little maintenance, and it's going to give you, once it's matured, year-round color. So with that, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Nick. So this is a style of planting that we've been perfecting for about 10 years, and you can all see it up on the monitor. This is obviously the Broad Street Rotary. It's hard to see, but you can see the road that goes down to Colburn Ave, and it's just to orient you. But it doesn't really matter because it's a big circle. So I was dealing indirectly with Nick last fall with another project, and commented to him when he saw the type of design that we were doing for this other project. I commented that this would be a fantastic application for the Broad Street Rotary. I travel by there all the time, and to me, it really could use a lot of help. There's a tremendous amount of traffic that comes through there every day, and this would be a very nice welcome into the city as you're driving in. So this type of planting is, for the most part, 100% herbaceous, which means it's all perennials. So there's a few reasons why it's really exciting. Number one, it's visually stunning. I mean, when it starts coming into its own in May, and then carries right into the summer months and then right into the fall months. All these species of plants that we're using have different bloom times, so you really have a nice progression right through the spring, summer, and fall, and really right into the late fall. A lot of these plants look great even after the first snowfall. Some of these are grasses or plants with seed heads. So it's really visually stunning, and the next slide is going to be some pictures of some of the plants that we use. So because you look at this and it really doesn't mean much to you. So here's a little sampling of some of the different plant materials that we use. So when these are all combined together, it just really is a very colorful and pleasing to look at composition. The second reason that it's exciting is it's relatively little money for what you're going to get. We're proposing to do this with small plants. You know, Nick and I have already sort of talked about what the budget for these plant material is. It's really pretty reasonable. Thirdly, it's exciting because it's sustainable, and what that means is once this planting has established itself, which really does take a year or two, it requires really no maintenance. Once you get past the first couple of seasons of managing your weeds, because that really is one of the big labor-intensive tasks early on, is managing your weed growth. Once you get beyond that, the plants just all start to knit together and become kind of impenetrable to weeds. It doesn't mean you're not going to get an errant weed every here or there, but after the first growing season or two, it really becomes impenetrable to weeds. No fertilization, no water once these plants develop a root system. Some of these plants have roots that go down, 5-10 feet deep, believe it or not. So they really, get a good access to ground moisture. So those are the three big exciting things about this style of planting. And I guess, are there any questions?
Any questions, comments for Mr. Parker? Commissioner Pappas?
I do think that those do look beautiful. I'm not sure if this question is for you in the contract or if it's for the superintendent. With all Parks and Rec has to do with the weeding, is that part of the contract for the first couple of years for the weeding? And
Well, Parks and Rec is already out there mowing this probably once a week in an average growing season. They're not going to need to be out there mowing. Incidentally, the annual maintenance for this, once we get beyond the initial growth stage, which really is the first year or two, is mowing it in the fall. And it is mowed. You put a mulching blade on the mower, you mow it high, you just mow it right down, and you leave that plant debris right there. Obviously, you would need to be tidying things up a little bit, stuff that's out into the street, chopping up some of the smaller pieces, but that plant debris wants to stay right there. These plants want to grow in their own debris, and that's what makes them very happy. That's one of the things that plays into the sustainability of this concept, is that plant debris starts to decompose and feeds the quality of the soil. There's also no bark mulching involved with this. Now, obviously, initially, when you put these plants in, they need to be mulched, but we're mulching with composted leaves, which Nick tells me he has an endless supply of. So.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is if it would make sense to use mulch, but I know people who have used the leaves for mulch.
Bark mulch is actually counterproductive to this type of planting. Plants have no relationship whatever with wood chips. They like to be in plant debris. So.
Thank you.
Nice idea.
Nice.
All right, well, I think thank you very much. Thanks for coming over. All right, next we have item B.
Move to approve the purchase of aquatic invasive weed treatment services from Aquatic Control Technology, Inc. of Sutton, Mass. for the sum of $33,668. Funding for this purchase will be from Department 177 Park and Recreation Fund, General and Trust, account classification 54, Property Services.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion?
I have a question.
Alderman Jettie.
What's the difference between this and the weed treatment that we're talking to Solitude about?
That's what this is. So what we did, Alderman, is the total project is being run by our waterways manager, Dr. Minu, and this is the park portion of that total contract. So we take care of the Mill Pond and Mine Falls and the canal. And this year I'm adding Sandy Pond because we've had some issues there. So they're going to be coming out, and we're getting a better value because of the bulk contract that we're doing. We take care of those ponds and under the parks, every other year. We've been doing this for about 8 years now. We started out where the weeds were so bad, we had to harvest them with a machine, and now we're at the point where we can control them with an aquatic herbicide.
So, Mayor,
Yes.
so explain to me what, you say it's part of the same thing, but why is one with Solitude and one with aquatic control technology?
It's the same company.
Oh, it
It's
is?
just- Yeah, it's just a different offshoot. So
Okay.
they're going to be treating the Nashua River as well, but that doesn't fall under our purview or funding capability.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll move to approve the contract with Target New England of Alton Bay, New Hampshire for the Main Street Bridge painting project in an amount not to exceed $57,500. Funding is through Department 160 Admin Engineering Fund Grant Activity Highway Block Grant FY17.
Second.
18, rather.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll
We
move-
have an informational item from Mr. Caggiano regarding, well, he will explain it.
Yeah, we, about a year and a half ago, I was approached by a resident that abuts the park, and they had some concerns about a large tree. They felt it was getting a little too big and said, can you think about taking it down? And once we looked at it, I was like, wow, this is pretty big. I knew it was a larch, which is kind of a rare tree up in this area. It's one of the deciduous evergreens, so it has needles, but they drop every year and then they come back. So I contacted the New Hampshire's Big Tree Program just to have it measured. They came and measured it, and I got told last month it's the largest larch, European larch in the state. So it's kind of a neat little thing.
Commissioner Pappas.
We actually, we were looking at a big larch on the oval where I live, and we kind of fund our own program where we have to plant the trees and get rid of them. And there are times when this tree looked totally, totally dead. And someone came, and I think from the same program, and we won an award one year. But there are times of the year those larches really look dead.
They do. So I'm kind of happy. I talked to the director a little bit about advertising a little bit, or maybe putting a sign there, which would be okay. I just don't want to over advertise it.
Commissioner Tease.
Out of curiosity, where in the park is it?
It's over near, I think that's Bates Drive. Goes
Oh, okay,
behind us there.
got it.
So it's between the gardens
Yeah.
and the back of our facility where we store the equipment.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes. Alderman Jettie.
you say you don't have a picture of it to show us?
I don't. I could take one.
And does this mean that the resident's request to cut it down has been denied?
Yes, and I met with him, and once he saw the people from the state come, he was all excited. He wants a copy of the certificate, so he was fine. Once he understood it wasn't dead, but it was just doing its natural thing, like Commissioner Pappas explained.
Maybe the neighbors section of the paper, I don't know. They get slow, they might put something in.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Caggiano. You're welcome. Now we're on to the street department.
Move to approve the purchase of 4 CMS 2333 electronic message boards from American Signal Company of Atlanta, Georgia, with a total purchase price of $91,099. Funding will be through Department 160 Engineering Fund Grant Activity Highway Block Grant.
Second to motion.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes.
I'll move to approve the purchase of one 2018 Morbeck Beaver M1 15R wood chipper from Morbeck, Wynn, Michigan, for the total price of $71,301.51. Funding will be through Department 160 Engineering Fund Grant Activity Highway Block Grant.
Second the motion.
Discussion? Commissioner Moriarty.
Just a question on, actually, both motions we're getting funding from the highway block grant, so is that federal highway, or is that state highway?
Johnny Barrett Street Department. That did come through from the state funding.
So this was a special one-time, I think it's $1.4 million.
1.3, yeah.
$1.3 million.
Remember the 1.3 million that we were allotted from the state?
Yes.
So
That's part of this.
It says over and above the regular block grant.
Correct.
And so it's all these equipment that is related to street maintenance is eligible for purchase through the block grant.
Perfect.
So, Commissioner Pappas.
Is the old one still going to be used, or are we still going to be able to fix that and use it, or is it?
It is still in service. It's just way underpowered. When these events come through, we like to have some big power so we can get a better response and open the streets better. This is a 174 horsepower motor powered by CAT. Take a 15-inch limb or a tree. So it's going to give a significant level of service and response in a storm that, like last year, we had 90 trees come down. This will really be helpful.
Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Jettie.
So on this and the previous item, when the memorandum talks about the quoted, in this case, the chipper through the NJPA, which is the equivalent of the state bid, does that mean that this was a low bid in some process?
So it's for federal and municipal governments, state agencies, which we belong to. It's a conglomerate, so it gives us more purchasing power. They set a rate equivalent to a state bid, and we can get on board going through that program and get the same savings.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Mayor?
Yes. Commissioner Pappas.
Can I ask a question? We, rather than wait to commissioner comments, I noticed that one year when we had a big storm, we picked up people's sticks, and I think they were delighted, because I think that people usually leave them out for their soft yard waste, and sometimes they're picked up and sometimes they're not. Before we start our solid waste pickup, there is a program that you can put huge amounts of wood out, and we do a really good job at spelling out what you can and can't put out. And I don't know what percentage of the population in Nashua takes advantage of that wonderful program. But most people don't have that much as far as sticks and that sort of thing. And if we plan for next year, I'm trying to think in terms of if, in addition to that very large collection, we can encourage people to put out their sticks for the year then. Because otherwise, we're stuck with people, they might think that, that they're not quite sure why their yard waste didn't get picked up, and people say, well, why don't they pick up my sticks? And it's, they take it, it's really nothing personal, that, we understand here that it breaks the trucks and that sort of thing. And I know that, in the past, we say, well, we don't have the money. Well, I do think that it's not I don't think it's unreasonable for residents to expect their sticks to be picked up once or even twice a year if we, decide. I get towards the end of the year when we have all those leaves that it just becomes very difficult. But I'm wondering if we might expand that program that we have where people can leave all these, large amounts out. If we can have people just put their sticks out for the stick collection, and maybe people do forget to call in. So as we do have radios in our trucks, so maybe as the trash trucks go through different neighborhoods, they can say, okay, there's a pile of sticks out at, 25 Broad Street, and we could go pick them up. Because I do think it's a problem, and I do think if we don't pick them up, then people hide them, they'll hide them in their soft yard waste, and it creates a problem for our truck. And now that we might have 2 chippers, I know that something like this takes a while to plan, but if we might plan on doing something like that next year, I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
We do have our regular spring cleanup that you mentioned, which I believe is completed now.
That's correct.
Yes.
But we do pick up sticks year-round, and we pick them up with our oversized item collection. So people can call in, and we will pick up sticks year-round.
Right, but I think that people's objection is that you have to go down and you have to bundle them up.
True.
I mean, that is a major pain in the neck, and we don't bring a chipper there right on site. If we have our chippers out in the neighborhood, I'm just wondering if that might be a good service for people, because people actually don't use the bundled up, because it is such a pain in the neck to do that. Or if we might say, all right, you don't have to bundle the sticks up, we can put them in a barrel. Because people do, they look at their property taxes, and they say, well, why would I call in these sticks if I have to go and I have to tie them up? I mean, I do think that is an extremely cumbersome process.
Sure. And it's certainly something we could do. That's something, though, that the street department would need to do, so.
That's why
if that takes a lot of time. That's why we try to do it before we really
Right.
get start our
Right.
construction season. So it would mean that we may not get some other work done,
And as far as the chipper going and doing it, the only thing I would say that'd be pertinent to that is storm cleanup, everything's fresh and green. And when you throw dead stuff through a chipper, you dull the knives really quick. So I would kind of want to stay away from that. That's an expensive upkeep to change those knives out. Just food for thought.
Right.
Not saying we couldn't, but
But is there a reason why we couldn't be a little less stringent about having people bundle their stuff up?
The reason we have to be that stringent is because right now solid waste is picking that up, so it's going in a packer, or another trash truck. So if we weren't, it would need to be done by the street department, like we do our spring cleanup, where we have less stringent rules about putting sticks at the curb.
Because
That's
technically,
why.
I will tell you, in years past, I've just called in for, I either drag it across the street if a neighbor has it out, but I've literally just dumped my sticks on the front, and they do pick it up, but I think that people forget to call in and that sort of.
Don't do it anymore, you're gonna get fined.
Well, actually, it's not right in the street, it's kind of half on the grass and half in the street, but. I don't know, I just, this is something that people get upset about. I just, I do think that we could be better. I think that we could be a little bit more lenient with our stick policy. Thank you.
Move to approve the user warrants as presented?
We're now under wastewater. Now, do we vote on the approval of the,
Yes.
oh, we did, okay. We're wastewater, the motion, is there a second regarding the user warrants?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed, and the motion passes.
Move to approve amendment number 2 in the amount of $8,200 to the contract with Woodard and Curran for the water booster station upgrade. Funding will be through Department 169 wastewater, Fund, SRF loan, activity, water booster station.
Second the motion.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
I'll move to award the generator procurement contract for energy recovery upgrades project to Southworth Milton, Inc. of Milford, Massachusetts, in an amount not to exceed $701,840. Funding is through Department 169 wastewater fund, WRF, activity, energy recovery generator.
Second.
Discussion? Commissioner Moriarty.
I was wondering if the superintendent could give a brief synopsis of this, please.
Yes, thank you. This is there is a generator in place, an old Waukesha generator for our energy recovery building. This services the digester complex. It's an old generator that doesn't work anymore, and as we update the whole energy recovery building, this would be 2 generators, smaller generators, that would replace that generator in place. It's used to run off of our biogas that the generator produces, and with this, the generator's running, we can actually, through net metering, send power back to the grid and have cost savings. So these generators would replace the existing one, the 2 smaller ones.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see that the city attorney is here. Are you here for anything specific? Or are you just kind of curious about what we're up to?
I know why
He's
here.
monitoring us?
He's here for a non-public.
Are you here for a
Appointed,
non-public
yes.
at the end?
Yeah, at the end of the meeting, if
Yes.
you go into non-public to talk about pending litigation.
So we can come and get you if you don't want to sit here all, I mean, this could go another half hour or more, I don't know. It's up to
Okay,
you.
I'll be right next door.
It's up to you.
Thank you.
All right, solid waste.
Move to approve a 3-year contract between the City of Nashua and Interstate Refrigerant Recovery, Inc. of Foxborough, Massachusetts for refrigerant recovery, CFCs, services at the Nashua Recycling Center at an annual cost not to exceed $20,000, pending approval of the FY19 operating budget. The term of this contract will be from July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2021. Funding will be through Department 168 Solid Waste Fund, Solid Waste, Account Classification 55, Other Contracted Services.
Second the motion.
Discussion?
Mayor?
Alderman Jettie.
So regarding the recovery of this and the next items, refrigerant, electronic waste, scrap metal, do the people who collect this that we contract with, do they turn around and sell this stuff? And is that all worked into this thing? Are we missing an opportunity, or is that part of this process?
The only thing that has any value would be the metal, and we're getting paid for that.
Okay, what, like the refrigerant, what do they do with it when they recover it? What is that?
Well, it's considered hazardous waste, so it's disposed of properly. Maybe Sally could speak to that a little bit more.
The refrigerants that are recovered can be recycled. They cannot be manufactured any longer because of federal law. So they are extracted and then sent to a place where they can recycle them.
They destroy the ozone layer
Yes.
if they get into
They
the
have an
atmosphere.
effect, an adverse effect on the ozone layer.
So when you say they, excuse me, Mayor?
Yeah.
When you say they're recycled, what does that mean?
It means that they go to, the people who extract the gases from the appliances that we have at the landfill, take it to a place where they reuse it for allowable uses, because there's no more that's being generated or manufactured.
Okay, so there's no value there that we're losing out on?
It's not something that we could do. I mean, you have to be certified by EPA in order to, it's like an HVAC person. You have to be certified to do this work, and then I don't recall where this company takes their, the material that they gather. And it varies. I mean, we know how much, they report how much poundage they collect, but it's not really all that much. So they take it to a place where they are allowed to handle it.
Okay, and if I could ask about the electronic waste, what about that? Do they, whatever they are able to recover from electronics, are they, I'm assuming there's precious metals in there that they're able to sell?
There are metals, there is plastic, there is glass. The markets for the material vary in terms, and of course, these days it's a little bit more difficult. the electronic process is a very hands-on. It's a demanufacturing process where they have to take everything apart. So it is very costly. We're fortunate to have an opportunity to get it at this price.
Where we could recover more is the charge to residents for this, for bringing an electronic component to the landfill is very low. I think you get free for 2, and then after that, $5 or something like that. What is the charge?
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Other communities charge a lot more than that.
Yes.
I think
They charge by the piece, there's no free, because look at what it costs to get rid of this stuff. And we're concerned, one concern about not charging is that we're getting electronics from other towns, right? Someone says, hey, I can get rid of your TV, I can just take it over to my line, you know, somebody in Hudson or something, you know? And a Nashville resident says, hey, give me the TV, I'll take it to the Nashville landfill, it doesn't cost anything. Now, whether that's happening, you know, we can only guess, but the, most towns require a significant, much more significant, you know, $25 or something like that to get rid of a electronic item. Yes, Alderman Jettie.
The other side of that is that, you know, if we're trying to encourage people to bring their electronics to a place where they can be taken apart and salvaged to some degree, as opposed to throwing it in the trash or throwing it elsewhere, if you charge people too much, they might find other ways of disposing of it that won't be so good for the environment or the community.
That is the other side of the question.
That's,
And at this point, that viewpoint has prevailed, and that's why, you know, the fee is non-existent or very low.
thank you.
Commissioner Pappas.
Can we put that on the agenda for next month? I've actually been the opposing view on that, because people are gonna get these huge tax increases, and they're gonna say, you know, what's happening? And I will tell you that I think if someone threw a TV someone's gonna throw a TV in their garbage can.
It's pretty bad,
If it was free, they still wouldn't bring it down to the landfill. I mean, and I do think that you get caught in a good portion of the areas that one would do that, because if you have semi-automated trash, there's no way you can stick a TV or a VCR in a trash in semi-automated neighborhoods where they wouldn't see it.
And so you're suggesting we put on for discussion the next meeting, the issue of whether we should charge for the electronic?
Right, and because I assume that, it has to be through ordinance that we switch the,
I think it would, yes.
yeah,
Correct.
thank you. If it's not a huge, long agenda,
Yeah, it's no problem. All right, but I believe we are still on item A, are we not? Which is the $20,000 for the
We're on B.
the refrigerants?
Oh, no, we're on B, Mayor.
Did we vote on the A?
We did.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
no, we didn't.
It was moved and seconded.
All right, so we're on A. Any further discussion on A? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
B, opposed? Motion passes. So we'll move on to B, which is the electronics.
Move to approve a 3-year contract between the City of Nashua and Universal Recycling Technologies, LLC, for the processing and disposal of electronic waste from the Nashua Recycling Center at an annual cost not to exceed $75,000 pending approval of the FY19 operating budget. The term of this contract will be July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2021. Funding will be through Department 168 Solid Waste Fund, Solid Waste Account Classification, 55 other contracted services.
Second the motion.
Discussion? We will have this on the next agenda in this general subject. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll move to approve a 3-year contract between the City of Nashua and Excel Recycling for the recycling of scrap metal at Four Hills Landfill. The term of this contract will be from July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2021, pending approval of the FY operating budget. Revenue generated through this contract will be directed to Department 168 Solid Waste Fund, Solid Waste Account Classification 44, Charges for Services.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes.
Move to award a one-year contract for the transportation and processing of the city's single-stream recyclables in the amount not to exceed $400,000 to Casella Recycling LLC of Charlestown, Massachusetts, pending approval of the FY19 operating budget, funding through Department 168 Solid Waste Fund, Solid Waste Account Classification 55, Other Contracted Services.
Second the motion.
Discussion?
Yes, Mayor?
Alderman Jettie.
So does this mean that, I know I've been told by the Solid Waste Department that the cost of processing or taking away our recyclables, the cost per ton is expected to go up. Is this a fixed contract where it's not going to go up or not?
No, I'll speak to that a bit. I'd like to speak a little bit to recycling in general. The state of recycling in this country is really sort of a disaster. Most of the recyclables were being shipped to China. That China has shut off almost all domestic U.S. markets now and others. And they really have their own internal markets now for recycling. And a lot of it was a contamination issue. They want less now than 1% contamination, which is virtually impossible to meet. So the U.S. market right now is really scrambling to find other outlets for recyclables. There just isn't enough domestically to take recyclables. There's virtually, for instance, no market for glass. Glass is being landfilled.
Not by us, though.
Not by
Casella.
us, but by Casella and by others. There's no market for it really. So back in July of 2017, we were paying under $1 a ton, including trucking, for recycling. By December, we were paying about $48 a ton for both processing and transportation. And our most recent in March was $72 a ton for processing and recycling. So it's really it's increased significantly, and it could go up to as high as $150 a ton. I hope that doesn't happen, but Casella has told us that we should plan on that it could go to $120 a ton.
And when was it $1?
Back in July of 2017, not very long ago. So things are really a challenge right now.
So within a year, it went from 1 to 150?
Right now, we're paying 72.
72.
Roughly 72 a ton. And we expect that to go up, Sally, next month. So it's been rapidly increasing.
What a interesting social problem you have, right? We encourage everybody to recycle, but yet it's going to potentially cause huge strains financially to do so.
You know, I think this is just my gut. I don't know this for sure, but I think things are going to level out. Recycling's big business in this country, and I think that we're going to find other markets. There are other countries, Vietnam, Thailand, other countries that are trying to jump into the market that I think will be probably receiving recyclables soon. I don't know how much more locally, domestically. There are some processing plants in Canada, you know, not too far away. But I think it's just right now with China all of a sudden shutting everybody off. Everybody's just kind of scrambling now to figure out what to do. So, but you know, another discussion I think at some point we should have is whether we continue to recycle glass. You know, does it really make sense for us that, you know, the value of our airspace is probably $60 a ton? Does it make sense to us for us to continue shipping glass at 72 to Casella when they're landfilling it? You know, is that something we should be taken out of our recycling?
What area of the budget do we have where costs are 72 times what they were last year?
Yeah,
From $1 to $72 a ton. It's a fairly significant.
Huge.
What is that, 7,200% increase? 7,000?
How many tons, out of curiosity, do we process?
About 5,000 a year.
Wow.
Commissioner Pappas.
And, just a comment, if, we might need to start giving people more garbage carts. I mean, if you have a decent size, if you have a fairly big family, and you're filling a green toter, which I do think the city should provide, but you purchase one of those, and then you might be filling 1 or 2 bins in addition, and then all of a sudden, there's a large portion which you might have to just throw in the trash. We might very well be in the position where we either have to accept trash where the lid is open, or maybe allow people to purchase a second cart. I mean, that's being realistic.
Yeah, these are times that we haven't seen. But again, I do think eventually it's gonna level off, but,
hope you're right.
Sally and I have had numerous discussions about this, and, it could take up to 5, people are saying up to 5 years, before things become, somewhat stable again, although we don't think we'll ever get to the point where we won't be paying, we'll be paying something. Maybe that's $25 a ton or so, but, I don't think, and I think Sally would agree, I don't think we'll ever see the days where we're not paying anything for recycling again.
Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Jennings.
So is Casella the only game in town, or are there other people that we've sought bids from, or?
I'm sort of hoping you weren't gonna ask that question. Yes, they are the only game in town. We had 2 bids, one withdrew their bid. Casella is the only company right now willing to take our recyclables. So if Casella pulled out of Nashua, we'd have no place to send our recyclables right now. That's the tough truth.
In order to improve the situation, potentially, maybe not, but in the budget is a $200,000 capital improvement item to provide a cover over the recycling storage bins that we have, the large, what are they called, bins? What do we call those?
Bunkers, the recycling
Bunkers, yeah. Because water is considered
Contaminant?
a contaminant, very good.
Some companies do consider it, Waste Management, for instance, said that they might bid on our recyclables if they weren't wet. Casella doesn't seem to bother them, that it's wet, but certainly it adds to the weight, so it benefits us to cover the.
Assuming that passes.
We reduce the weight of the recycling,
Assuming
paper
it
recycling
passes,
items.
we accomplish 2 things. Number 1, we reduce the weight, because now the rain isn't falling on the recycled bunkers and the materials. And number 2, maybe we get a second bidder. I mean, maybe.
Maybe. But, it's communities are getting dropped left and right. I mean, there are a lot of municipalities scrambling right now that just can't afford to fund their recycling programs and wondering what they're going to do. Smaller communities, so times are tough.
So, one last thing, I know that people say one of the ways of dealing with this is not to produce so much trash to begin with.
Right, absolutely.
What is it, reduce?
Reduce what?
Reuse,
Reduce and
recycle.
reuse, yes. The 3
I
Rs.
learned that from Sally, and I know she's doing a great job, but is there anything that we could do to redouble or triple our efforts to publicize this whole concept of
Yes.
of reducing waste?
That's a very good point. Yeah, and yes, in fact, I've spoke with both Sally and Lauren Byers about that, and in the coming weeks, you'll be seeing some information about not only reducing and reusing, but also contamination. That's another problem. In fact, I had a conversation with Commissioner Pappas about this. We tended to be pretty lenient about what we'd accept for recycling, and we've had to get a little tougher because, you know, the reality of it is we only have, if Casella decides that we have too much contamination in our recycling and decide not to take it, we're in trouble. So one of the things that people often do is they put their recycling in plastic bags thinking they're helping, when, you know, that's a big contaminant in recycling, or plastic bags. So I know, Alderman Jettie, that's something that you're working on as well, plastic bags. And so, you know, we're trying to educate residents, please don't put, you know, keep your recycling loose, do not put it in plastic bags. The other thing is food waste, you know, the recyclables need to be clean.
Mayonnaise in a jar or something, yeah.
Yeah. People are, or they're leaving, you know, soup in a container, or you know, that sort of thing, you know. So organics and plastic bags right now are sort of a big problem. So we're going to be doing some educational outreach. Sally and Lauren will be working together to get some information out. That's a very good point.
Commissioner Pappas.
I will just go ahead and micromanage the folks. The only reason I was aware that people did this is I often will take out people's trash or recycling when they're away. And I think that people, I rinse my stuff out, so those of us who don't mind stuff on the counter, and then each person that goes out will throw the stuff in the bins. There are other people that don't like the look on the counter, so they will have they'll have a separate area, like a trash can for recycling, and they line it with a garbage bag. It is neater, it's easier to bring out. So if that is indeed the way you do your recycling, and you've done it in the past and they separate it out, that's actually a lot of work, then if that's how you like to do it in your house, you take the bag and you just empty the stuff into your cart. Because I think people have been just putting the trash bags in it and we have been taking it. So, you know, I don't know if we might put something into our tax bills just to remind people. That's a good way, because not everyone goes on Facebook, and if they do, they may not be looking us up on Facebook.
Yeah.
So whether it's tax bills, whether it's wastewater bills,
That's what we
I think that might be a good, because
that's a
then we're
very
not
good idea.
spending extra postage that way.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and another thing that people are putting in their recyclables because they think this is recyclable, they tend to put everything together as food scraps. Please don't put food scraps into your recyclables, you know. People tend to think, well, that's recyclable, you know, but clean containers, paper, you know, only. But, so anyway, we will be doing some educational outreach.
All right, so is there any further discussion on item B? We have a pending motion.
Oh, could I just mention one
Yes.
more thing? Sorry, regarding solid waste, because this has become a bit of an issue. So, soft yard waste in carts with wheels on them. We've always sort of had a policy that said you shouldn't have wheels on your solid waste carts because they get damaged. They're really, the carts that you buy at the local hardware store are really not meant for collection. So we get a lot of calls about, and we will not, if people buy a cart with wheels on it and it's damaged, we cannot replace them. It was solid waste sort of decided to try to enforce that and not pick up carts with wheels, unbeknownst to many of us. So that we are going to continue to pick up carts with wheels on them that have soft yard waste in them. But we just want all residents to know that we won't replace them if they're damaged, because they really can't withstand the tough environment of collection.
I certainly would agree with that. The other thing is just to remind people, because people do forget, you obviously don't have a scale by where your trash is, but it shouldn't be over 60 pounds. And what I always do is I see if I can lift it. But as a reminder, people who do grass clippings, if you have a Thursday or Friday pickup and you do your lawn on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, it's gonna create a lot of moisture within that time, so you really, because we don't pick it up over, I think they're pretty strict about that, and I understand why, so.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you.
Any other discussion on D? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Move to approve a contract with SCS Field Services of Reston, Virginia to construct an expansion of the landfill gas collection system in the Phase 1/2 landfill in the amount of $427,654. Funding will be through Department 168 Solid Waste Fund Bond Activity Landfill Gas Expansion FY19.
Second the motion.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll move to approve the residential and
Here.
commercial.
Now, Mr. Dukran did step out or something. All right, anyway, Commissioner Pappas.
I'll move to approve residential and commercial wastewater service permit and fees as submitted.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I'll move to approve drain layers license for WF Grace Construction LLC, 29 Tandy Road, Deerfield, New Hampshire, in accordance with Nashua City Code issuance of drain layers license.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Move to approve the construction contract for the 2018 paving program to Newport Construction Corp. of Nashua, New Hampshire, in the amount of $6,727,834. Funding will be through Department 161 Street Fund Bond Activity Paving, Department 161 Street Fund Trust Account Category 81 Infrastructure Improvements, Department 169 Wastewater Fund Wastewater Activities, Sewer Structures and Sewer Rehab.
Second the motion.
So this is one of the principal paving contracts.
Correct. This just does not include the federal dollars.
Yes. Any questions or discussion? Commissioner Moriarty.
Yeah, I was just wondering, have we used Newport in the past for paving? I don't recall that company.
Newport hasn't had a contract directly with the city,
I didn't think so.
but they have worked as a subcontractor with our paving contractors.
We did bring them in and had a discussion with them because I had the same anxiety, you know, it's such a large paving program. I was very pleased by the meeting. I hope that things go well. Rick DeFelice, who is the owner of Newport Construction, lives right here in Nashua, which makes me happy because I think he's going to certainly want to do well by his own community. And they seem very excited, and they do have a lot of experience. It's a pretty big company. They have 169 employees. They've done most of their paving in Massachusetts. That's where they've, and then when they saw this come up, they decided to bid on it. They do have some very experienced people. So, you know, the owner even gave me his cell phone and his private email, and you know, so I don't think he would have done that if he wasn't going to do a great job. So. I think, you know, while we've had some trouble in the past, so, you know, I think Engineer Dukran and I are a little cautious, but cautiously optimistic. Yeah. Right?
You're right.
So, Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Jettie.
So you referenced the problems we've had. You know, I don't know of this directly, but I've heard that we've had some paving done where it hasn't stood up when we had criticisms of it. Is that something, I mean, are there experts that look at the paving after the fact, or the material, and say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't provide the right formula here, and we have a claim against the contractor?
Yeah, I think we want to be careful about talking about anybody specific, but I think so far, any issues that we've had, we have plans to rectify, so.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I think at the Board of Aldermen meeting, there was talk about hiring an expert to test the material as we're doing it. Is that going to be in play with this contract?
We will be testing on-site and at the plant.
Good.
For this contract.
Excellent.
Anything else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll move to approve the purchase of manhole and catch basin castings from B3, EJ Prescott Inc. of Concord, New Hampshire, in an amount of $159,686. Funding will be through Department 169 wastewater fund, wastewater account, activity sewer structures.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye,
Aye.
and the motion passes.
Aye for me, I'm sorry I didn't speak soon enough.
Well, we had enough votes even without it.
Move to approve the construction contract for the Amherst Street and Broad Street sidewalk repairs to Leighton A. White of Milford, New Hampshire, in an amount of $414,265, and authorize use of Northwest Quadrant Trust Funds in the amount of $180,948, and the use of Somerset Plaza Trust Funds in the amount of $36,607 toward funding of the contract. Funding will be through Department 160 Admin Engineering, Fund General, Activity Street Infrastructure Improvements, and Department 160 Admin Engineering, Fund Trust, Account Category 54 Property Services.
Second the motion.
Is there discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll move to approve the contracts with DeLuca Fence in an amount of $25,874 for the installation of a fence at the Parkway retaining wall and $72,993.75 for funding on the Fairmont Street Bridge. Funding is through Department 160, Admin Engineering, Fund Bond, Activity, Broad Street Parkway.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 The motion passes.
I'll move to approve the construction contract for 2018 CIPP lining to Lane Inliner of Fairfield, Maine, in the amount of $715,657.50. Funding is through Department 169 wastewater fund, bond activity, sewer rehab.
Second the motion.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes.
Move to authorize the use of DW Highway and Spitbrook Road traffic mitigation funds in an amount not to exceed $5,000 for uniformed officers and flaggers to provide traffic control during the replacement of traffic equipment along DW Highway and Spitbrook Road. Funding will be through Department 160 Admin/Engineering Fund Trust, Account Category 55 Other Services.
Second.
Discussion?
Mayor,
Yes, Alderman Jettie.
do we have to use uniformed police officers to be flaggers on construction projects? Or can we use non-police officers?
It all depends on the location, on the main streets, the busy locations. You want officers, and you want at least one cruiser at those locations. In not so busy areas, you can use flaggers, and in some places you actually see a combination, one officer with two flaggers. If you come down Kinsey Street, you might have seen that today. With this project, because you're working at signals, there will be times when you would have to actually take maybe one lane from this signal, and you'll have to have some kind of a traffic direction. So this will better be done by police officers. And in some cases, you may have to take the signal off in order to conduct the work. And in that case, you want cops, present.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll move to approve the agreement to reimburse the Town of Hudson for the bridge evaluation engineering study in an amount not to exceed $25,000. Funding is through Department 160 Engineering Fund Grant Activity Highway Block Grant.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes. So we're now going to go on to the administration and the director's report.
And the first slide is a new sewer service at 4 Beard Street. Next, this is a new 20-foot trailer that we purchased for Park and Rec. That way, we'll be able to keep the trailer loaded and just drive it off to wherever it's going instead of loading and unloading, which will be a lot more efficient. This is a new fire alarm panel at Holman. This panel controls the sprinkler system that is pictured on the right, and this one replaces the one that shorted out last fall. We did some outfield wall repairs also at Holman. These are the pictures of the new sections that were repaired from the wind damage from last October's windstorm. They still need one more coat of paint. But the wading pool at Greeley Park sustained some damage over the winter. The damage to the concrete is pretty significant. We're going to repair it well enough so we can get through this season, but we're going to need to replace it this fall. We expect it's going to be somewhere in the $30,000 range to replace it. And we'd like to, the superintendent and I are talking about adding maybe some kind of fun element or something for the kids.
Why did it get damaged?
From the winter, extreme frost and, yeah.
Was the water, was it drained?
Oh, yes, it was drained, yeah. It's just wear and tear, you know, it's old. It needed to be replaced anyway, but this winter was just tough on streets, on everything. There's a Summer Fun Fishing Derby coming up on April 28th from 8 to 11 at the Horse Pond Fish and Game Club. And it's limited to the first 75 children who sign up. So, and you must pre-register by calling 589-3370 or emailing the Recreation Department at recreation@nashua.nh.gov. You can also find this information on the website. And I think it was posted on Facebook as well. The Walk for Recovery Awareness kicked off the bandshell season on March 31st. There was also a ceremony at the Holocaust Memorial on April 12th. On April 14th and the 21st, over 100 people helped pick up the rail trail and inner city parks, the Library Walk, and Mine Falls Park. And this is, you can see PAL is helping on Community Service Day. This is West Hollis at Riverside. The traffic control box needed some repairs. It was damaged during snow operations. Some of the top of the concrete box required some masonry work, so repaired that. This was an emergency sewer repair at 24 Burgess Street. The pipe was replaced by our own staff. The brine storage tanks have arrived, both the storage tanks for the brine we'll be making and also the applicator skid tanks that will be fitted on 4 of our 6-wheelers for the pre-storm application. So really excited to tell you more about that as it gets closer to the fall. This is a sewer repair on Taylor Street. Again, another emergency due to an old pipe that had failed. We had needed to repair the guardrail at Pershing and Kinsley due to a motor vehicle accident. This is a common area that we've repaired this a few times since I've been director. There's the update on the digester cleaning. We began dewatering again the digested material on Saturday, April 21st, and we expect to begin reusing it via land application by the middle of next week. So that was a big project, but it went very well. The special pickup for bulky and metal items began April 16th and will run until mid-November. Again, reminder, residents must call to schedule a pickup. And our first week of our soft yard waste collection started April 16th. The first couple of weeks are always tough. Just a lot of material. It's a real struggle to try to pick up the first couple of weeks, so patience are much appreciated. And we had students from Broad Street School at the Solid Waste Department to learn about recycling. The kids at PAL are touring all of our departments. They visited the Solid Waste Department on Friday, April 13th. They had some great questions, and they were an interesting group of kids. It was fun. Our first hazardous waste collection was this past Saturday. It was very successful. At one point, the cars were almost back to the high school. There were so many people. And our next collection takes place on Thursday, June 7th from 3 to 7. Again, yes, at the street department. Is that what it, yeah, at the street department. And I spoke of this earlier, in the contamination. You can see some of the contamination in the recycling. Plastic bags, again, is a problem in organics. Those are the big issues. And we will be embarking on an informational campaign soon to talk about contamination and recycling. And that's it. Any questions?
All right, next we have personnel issues.
Commissioner comments in case anyone has any.
Oh, sorry. Commissioner comments.
May I speak?
Oh, yes, of course.
I just want to take the opportunity to publicly thank Director Foto, who was kind enough to share with me the grounds of I didn't get to see Nick Caggiano and his group, but admittedly, I saw enough of them growing up as a kid, and they live right near Greeley Park, but I was very fascinated to learn about, and we spent several hours together and learned a lot about the departments, and enjoyed meeting the superintendent very much. One stop on our tour was Burke Street. And at the time that came about, I was a citizen, private citizen. But I'd be interested in learning from my peers who were commissioners at the time, without my having gone back and reading the minutes, just interested in the thought process that we went through in determining what to do with that property, and the result in the budget of 40 or 50 million.
Yeah, it was about 50 million.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you might just take a minute just to share with me your recollection of that. Not picking on you necessarily, by the way.
It was, it's interesting. One of the things, I think I was one of two people who voted against the purchase. And the only reason, and I have to tell you, I knew it was going to pass, so my feet weren't totally to the fire. The reason I felt so conflicted is that I know that it abuts the wastewater facility, but we don't have any immediate plans, just in case there's some sort of expansion. The reason I voted no on the facility is that I had, in my years on the board, it just seemed at times numbers were just pulled out of the air, and I did not know how realistic. What was the initial amount of money they said that was going to cost to get Burke Street up and running?
10 to 15.
10 to 15 million, and I didn't trust the figure, so I voted no for the purchase, and I also voted no, number one, for the Burke Street. Not a single resident was for that price tag for that building. I also thought that we did not vet the process. For example, injecting that many trucks into a neighborhood. I don't think that we gave, the neighborhood a whole lot of information. They didn't necessarily know what was coming to them. And the other issue is when you make a financial decision like that, what we hadn't done is to say, all right, what does each department need for their buildings to be a little bit more functional? I really question our whole capital improvements process when I look at Nick's place over at the Superintendent Caggiano over at the park. I mean, that probably should have been taken care of they should have done something with that in the 70s. So for me, it was a financial decision. It was not just my money, it was the taxpayers' money. And I just thought the price was too high.
Am I free to talk?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that perspective. It didn't necessarily go to what I was asking about But you actually bring up a really good point, I think. In my mind, as John, public citizen here, when it happened, I thought, boy, it's a great opportunity to buy abutting land. It's 20-something acres, you know. Last time I checked, there's not going to be that type of land in close proximity to the wastewater plant. Made good business sense, I think. And from what I understand, there was probably an aggressive timeline to have to bid and so forth. But you bring up just such a wonderful point in terms of the strategic planning of it. Could we have vetted it better? Was it rushed? I'm not going to say yes or no. But as I walk through there, and particularly the garage, I mean, how many square feet? 100,000 square feet or something? It's an amazing building.
Oh, I fell for the garage.
A lot of potential. And I thought, and I don't know where this stands, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Director, with respect to our plans, but I'd like to maybe revisit this topic and kind of take the board through a strategic planning process and get input from folks that are knowledgeable with respect to construction, as opposed to going to one person, maybe gather many builders and see if we can't get folks to provide input and almost solve our problems, but come to the meeting prepared. You know, again, the Burke Street was like halfway through, and I walked in, you know, at the landfill, I walked into their kitchen, and Lisa was upset of the director of photos, upset at the chairs, and I said, oh, that's a pretty cool place to hang out. But, and admittedly, some of the other spaces probably need to be improved. But I thought if we were to host a well-thought-out meeting of Board of Public Works and invite builders, designers, architects, and inform them kind of what we're faced with, what we're looking for, and ask for feedback, it might be time well spent and might provide us with some good information to maybe make decisions on how to move forward with such a strategic piece of property.
Right, but I do think that, I think that the project was well vetted. It was just, we're a city and we're not, I'm sorry, I didn't ask to speak first. The reason I think the purchase was a mistake, we had to purchase it without having an inspector take a look at it. And that made me very nervous because we aren't real estate entrepreneurs. But rather than just talk about Burke Street, I think that we need to talk about the other places, because if you just compare one, if you just have one price.
Yeah, so that's actually, again, a perfect segue into, maybe I didn't express it well, but as I visited some of the sites, it seemed as though they were in need of some repair and so forth. And I don't know what the actual vision was for the project, but seemingly many different departments, not necessarily all public works, but maybe other areas of the city. So could we take an opportunity as commissioners of this board to speak strategically about it and solicit input from the superintendents as to what their needs, you know, there's needs and there's desires, and maybe we find somewhere in between, and then solicit input from the city, right? From other folks, the community, and have the community help structure something that might be a good resolution for us, right? Because we're, like you said, we're not developers, right?
No.
We're just commissioners. Yeah. So I don't know what would need to happen, Mr. Mayor, for that, but I'd greatly like to see us, we made a large investment, and I'd like to see us perhaps evaluate again the opportunities at this wonderful resource.
Do you have thoughts as to, not that you have to express them now, but thoughts as to who would be constructive participants in the meeting, where we would invite contractors and developers in to take a look at it, or and to talk about the buildings?
So kind of my general thoughts are, I'd want to be all-inclusive, right? And again, I'm not sure what was intended for that building in terms of what other areas of the city. But obviously, I'd like to revisit that. I'd like to have input or representation from the Board of Aldermen, and gather input from the superintendents at the Public Works and other areas that potentially were going to be moved there, find out what the needs are. You know, so this may be much bigger than Board of Public Works, but more importantly, invite folks in the community, and I'll refrain from using specific names, but, I could come up with a list of 10 builders, big and small and anywhere in between. And then people that are specifically focused on roofs and other things, and have them help solve our problem, as opposed to pick one and say, hey, build it for us. And I think we'll get a better project and a better product by having many minds come together, hear what our problem is, and have them as a group solve it. Because I don't think we'll ever build this all at once. It may be a several-year phase project, but I think if we get them together, walk through the project, show them what our needs are, we're gonna get pretty good output. And if anything, it's a day well spent with colleagues, learning about the project, and meeting contractors in the region.
So I think the two decisions that got made were, number one, on the purchase. I was on the Board of Aldermen then. It was an auction situation, bid as is, no inspection. And there were two justifications, basically. Number one was it's adjacent to the sewage treatment plant. There might be expansion, and obviously that is now, prior to the purchase, is hemmed in by a neighborhood, and trying to expand the facility would be very difficult. The land area of the facility would be difficult or impossible. So this solved that problem, the purchase. Number two, the estimate provided was that the cost of renovation into a roughly 1,000 square foot office space and a functional garage for Public Works was 10 to 15 million. Well, we knew that building a new garage would be far, far, far more than that. So on both counts, it seemed like a good idea. And it was an auction situation, so there was it was definitely, there wasn't, if we're gonna bid, at least as we were told, if we're gonna bid, the bid's tomorrow, or it's in a week. I mean, there's not time for, Anyway, so then, after the purchase, which took place, I think, in the fall of 2015, then we began to look at how to make the renovation. We had a group of people, including Alderman Dean, Commissioner Bergeron, others. Alderman McCarthy, to look at, okay, well, let's define this project. But as they got into it more and more deeply with a specific architect, well, it started to become, well, it might go over 20. Right. Well, it might be 30. It might be 40. Well, it's going to be more like 50. And for the city, a $15 million project, yeah, it's a sizable project, but it can pretty easily be fit into the bonding schedule as we're paying other debt off, so that it doesn't have a big impact on the tax rate. But when you're talking about a $50 million project, that's an entirely different magnitude, and I think the commission, in reviewing that cost, this commission voted, just not to proceed, and that's what happened. And in reality, I don't think the alderman would have backed that amount anyway. So that's where we are now. What do we do with the building now? What if, would you mind working with the director to kind of at least develop a plan as to how we should proceed in the steps that you have suggested, meeting with the contractors? I mean, we can meet with the alderman at any time, but part of it, but because cost is such a driving factor, I think the alderman would like to know what this would cost. If it's 10 million, it's one thing. If it's 70 million, it's it's totally different. Now, the idea was that in the office building, there was enough room for Public Works plus another department. So when the project still seemed financially feasible, the school department administration looked at it, and they were lukewarm, but kind of willing to move in, as long as it was done quickly. There was the health department, and there were kind of mixed feelings about that, both in the health over at Mulberry Street. and among the aldermen and the like, there were advantages and disadvantages. Now it seems like that building is just gonna be improved in place, the Mulberry Street building. So, and then the costs came in, and, you know, so the school department and Mulberry Street started looking elsewhere when the project was halted. Yes.
To answer your question, I'd be honored to work with the director on a project like that. And, you know, I think if that land purchase came up again, and I was in a position to vote on it, I'd probably vote to purchase it in the same manner the alderman did, just because they're not going to create any more land in that strategic location. I perhaps wouldn't vote for a $50 million bond. But what I'd rather do is, you know, I kind of envision a morning of walking through the building, serving lunch in that garage area, so long as it's not too hot, and having presentations by each of the superintendents talking about what their needs are, what some of the impediments were that we found during the evaluation process 2.5 years ago, and ask for creative ways to solve them. As an example, and I'm no builder, but one of the things that was brought to our attention was the roof might not be strong enough to hold the, so I said, well, can you heat the roof? You know, melts off as it hits. And I think if we get folks in the room that have worked on, you know, different projects, all for a sandwich and a cup of soup, we might end up with a lot more information and knowledge to then work towards a project that's feasible, that's financially responsible, and going to be beneficial to the employees and not be costly to the taxpayers.
Now, I think I left one thing out, which was that as the analysis of costs was coming to a conclusion, there was a meeting which I attended. I hadn't really, you know, it was mostly the others, the people on the committee who were actively involved before that. And it was, the idea was, well, we could rehab the garage. A couple of, you know, it would not hold a proper snow load, so we would need to shovel the garage, the top of the garage, the roof. And number two, the piers are kind of close. Now, in terms of maneuvering the equipment, and that's part of the whole rationale, is getting the equipment under a roof. It can work, but it's not very efficient. So the idea, and we could do that for $43 million. So it's sort of like, well, we're going to spend $43 million, have to shovel the roof because it doesn't meet code on the load, and the equipment doesn't go in very easily. We're going to spend $43 million to get a kind of functional, but not that you know, maybe not even functional facility. So then everybody there, I think, said, well, look, I mean, what would it cost to just tear down the thing and build a new garage? Because why spend all that money to get a facility that doesn't really work that well? Then the cost moved from 43 to 49. I think I'm correct on those numbers.
Close. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so you'll work with Director Photo and come up with a plan of action as far as getting people to come in and, you know, getting input and all that.
Okay, and that's something we'd report back in a month?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any problems with that? All right. Thank you for the offer.
I just have two other things.
Yes.
If we could, before we go into non-public for personnel. We need, our next meeting is May 24th, and there's a conflict on that date. And we were wondering if we could move that meeting to May 31st, which is, May 24th is a Thursday, May 31st is also a Thursday, at 4:30 instead of 5:30. So wondering if the commissioners could do that.
Not a problem with my schedule.
May 31st?
May 31st at 4:30, is that?
I
that
don't
too for you?
know. I've got an old-fashioned calendar.
Okay,
I'll check.
okay, thank you.
I have no
Commissioner
issue with
Moriarty,
that.
are you
I'm
okay with,
fine
okay.
with that.
Can you please remind me of the
Thank you.
time? Is it stay at 5 o'clock?
4:30.
4:30.
4:30.
Can I?
That's okay.
You have to take off, or no? Okay, thanks.
I'm the new person on the block, but I kind of like the afternoon or earlier afternoon meetings. I don't. Is that a bad time?
Don't even bring that up.
Okay, who's gonna hit me first?
Well,
There was,
what happened there was, as the Board of Public Works became more and more prominent in terms of the decisions that were being made, specifically downtown sidewalks and the Broad Street
Got it.
Parkway. Some people argued, me among them, I'll admit that, that they needed to meet when people could attend, and when people such as maybe yourself, who might have daytime commitments, or specifically, ultimately, Paul Bergeron, could actually, run and serve at, if they had to work during the day, they could still be on the board at night, right?
Point well taken.
And
I'll drop my votes.
so after, I won't go through all the details of how all that played out, but anyway, it was decided that Public Works would meet in the late afternoon, and making it more, we thought, public-friendly.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner?
I put up with a lot of guff, even though this 1 o'clock time works great for me, but I do think that it kind of really hinders who can run for office. And I pushed it for when I was up for election, so that it doesn't look like I'm keeping it at a time that's convenient for me, so.
But I know Paul said that, he couldn't have run if he had to attend afternoon meetings, because he couldn't get that much, where he was working at the time, he couldn't get that much time off. And so that was one of the reasons. I mean, he that was after the fact. But anyway, anything else before we go to,
One
what's the
other-
next item?
I just have one other thing.
Okay, Director.
Okay, so we have had a policy here in the city, not really a public works policy, but for summer help, we've been hiring 18-year-olds, so adults. We've had a bit of an issue this year. Last year was a little bit of a struggle, but this year especially, we are short. We have enough solid waste employees, but we're short about 4 park and rec employees, which is a big deal. So what we've been talking about is hiring 17-year-olds, and they wouldn't drive, they wouldn't be on the back of Packers or anything like that, but they would be doing sort of landscaping work for park and rec. And just wanted to, we've sort of vetted that through legal and risk and HR in the mayor's office, and I think everybody's okay with that, provided that there are some parameters around that. And I just wanted to check with the board to see if you had any concerns about trying to lower the age limit to 17, so that we might be able to get some additional.
Sounds good.
I have no problem with it.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all.
Mayor?
Alderman Jettie has-
Yes, Alderman Jettie.
A couple of things. So we were talking about organic material like food scraps contaminating the recyclables. There is an organization in Nashua called Grow Nashua.
Yes.
They have a website, grownashua.org, and they have a program where for a fee, they will come to your house once a week and pick up compostable material, which would be vegetables, food scraps, coffee grounds, paper towels and napkins and that type of stuff. So if anyone, is looking for a place to put their compostable material, not in the recyclables, but to help out this organization, and they compost it, and then they use it for the community gardens and stuff in town. So grownashua.org. And secondly, your 17-year-olds, I know a perfect place for them to work. And that is, I've had a lot of people asking me about cleaning up the roadsides. The city owns a lot of property. And like on Gilson Road, on Ridge Road, and it's places, it's all city-owned property, and the roads are littered with plastic bottles and metal cans, beer cans, more often than not. And so when people called me and complained about that, you in your office told them and me that the city could not afford to do this. And that it was up to the residents to get together and do it themselves. And I can understand people cleaning up their own property, but the city property, as a responsible landowner, I would think the city would clean its own property. You know, if we can get volunteers to do it, you know, there are a couple of groups in my neighborhood that are trying to get organized to do that. And last weekend, or the weekend before, I think it was last weekend, they had a lot of downtown Nashua organized a big campaign, and they did, a lot of volunteers came out and really helped out. But I would hope that the city would be able to find a way. I know when I was going to college and law school, I worked in the work-study program. And in fact, the city hired me. And, you know, I worked for the city during the summers while I was going to school. And I don't know if that's still available, still around. But anything we can do to, you know, to find, you know, help out students and also get a source of labor that would be able to do things like the cleanup, you know, like weeding, you know, those types of jobs that the city, I think, needs. And I'm disappointed to find out that the city, you know, that answer that the city can't afford it.
It's not as much a money issue as it is a resource issue. We don't have the people. As it is, we struggle to try to maintain things like Main Street and our parks and the rail trail. So to do litter control along streets, we just don't have the people to be able to do that, unfortunately.
This is not streets, this is city property, which of course is adjacent to streets.
Right.
But it's property owned by the city.
We just don't have the people to do it. Not that I don't think that's a worthwhile thing to do. We don't have the people. We're also constrained by our union contracts. So even if we're not allowed to hire anymore, any additional summer help beyond the numbers that we currently have, unless we hire some additional full-time people. So that's another problem we have. But I'd love to be able to do that. I do think it's worthwhile. The problem is we don't have the resources. As it is now with Park and Rec, we don't have the manpower to be able to do everything that we need to do. We have another person budgeted for half a year this coming year, which will help. But we've added and added and added, you know, parks and trails, and we haven't added any staff. So we're really struggling to keep up with what we have, unfortunately. So it's not that we don't want to do it; it's that we don't have the resources to be able to do it, unfortunately. Yeah. But, you know, that's something that neighborhoods have been very successful with doing, neighborhood cleanups, and that's what a lot of folks are doing, and that's been a great success. We provide the gloves and the rakes and the bags, and then we pick up the trash after, and so, you know, a little help like that from residents does go a long ways.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else under Commissioners' comments? If not, this personnel item of accepting the retirement,
Yes.
that's an open session, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Is there a motion on that?
So moved.
Discussion? Well, this is our second, sorry.
Should we not read the motion?
Yeah, sure.
This is in public, and then we'll go into non-public.
Right.
Yep.
To accept the retirement of Philip Appart, Industrial Pretreatment Coordinator, effective April 27th, 2018.
Second.
Discussion?
Thanks for the save.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion on the non-public session?
Moriarty, I think you have I gave you the.
Ready? I move by roll call that the board go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A3, Roman numeral 2B, the hiring of any person as a public employee.
Second.
Can you please call the roll?
Mayor Donches?
Yes.
Mayor Donches?
Yes.
Commissioner Pappas?
Yes.
Commissioner Moriarty?
Yes.
Commissioner Tease?
Yes.
Motion passes, and we'll be going into non-public session.